But no one is doing anything, as long as I know. So Jeremy Horns, the people who knows Jeremy, he was begging me to start again the track. I said, no, we're not going to do it. We failed 2 times, 2 years, and I'm not going to fail again. He said, please, please, please. I said, forget it. And the people who know Jeremy, you know how impulsive and, you know, he's
almost
scaring, you know, when he asks for something that he's convinced. Almost scaring, I would say scaring. But I told him I'm not going to do it. But we received the paper that about the blockchain that I am completely ignorant, but it's not false. I'm not trying to be false, humbly false. You see, I'm completely ignorant on that. But I can think about analogical thinking, and I can see analogy. And when I saw the applications that it's having from the 2017 up to the present, I said that is going to solve the problem. Maybe I'm wrong. So I started looking in the web, and I found some people saying what I told my wife. This is a crazy idea. I told her, and the guy in the web, in his blog, he said, maybe I'm crazy, but couldn't we do that? So I noticed that Elsevier started that somehow. I say somehow because I didn't have the time to read it. So what we have here now is a reminding of what's going on. And I think it's time to do something. But not because Jeremy convinced me, but because we saw the possibility of this new technology to be applied to the very old problem. But let's make the research. This is what research is for, to see if we are wrong or not. So please, if you are not related to the computer field, in the different departments in your university, talk with them about that possibility. They would probably understand more than what I understand now, because I'm not in the field. So in the 91, 92, in the 90, there was a study, a survey that was made to the people, to the scientists in one of the largest association of science in the United States, at least. And just only 8% of them thought that peer review have any value. So the question, what did we do since the 90s about the problem? Maybe my ignorance isn't that also, but I've been, since I was Dean of Research in my university, I was looking for answers. I never found them up to the present. So what are we doing? Are we going to continue kidding ourselves that we are scientists, we are engineers, and we don't care about this huge problem, and don't care? So someone told me, don't say that, I'm going to say it. Is it an ethical problem for us to at least to try? Because we are supposed to be academic and to be looking for the truth. 8% just believe of the science. If you do that with the engineer, the 8% would be 1%. Some examples, very old. I tried here the oldest thing that I could find just to inform you how old is the problem. And we did nothing about it. In the 82, Harvin, which is the editor of two journals, very respected journals in medicine, peer review a philosophically false concept which is proving disastrous for science. Magallanes said, peer review does not prevent scientific fraud, hardly detect errors, and only modestly improves scientific quality. And he is, in my opinion, an optimist guy. Because it does not, in my opinion, it does not improve it. Sometimes it worsens it. But let's accept what he's saying. So I invited him to be with us here because he's editor of several journals and founding editor of several journals. So please interrupt me anytime you disagree with me. Because you would not be disagreeing with me, but with them.
Well, if anyone actually read my journal, the disastrous consequences of peer reviews, but since most of the journals that I deal with in business have no impact, it becomes a kind of it's hard to get quite as emotionally involved as I would in the sciences where we're dealing with medical discoveries and stuff like that. My motto in LinkedIn is because MIS research doesn't matter, it's safe for me to do it.
But it's not just in medicine, in physics.
Yep.
Lazarus, which was the editor of the most respected journals in physics at the time, he said in only about 10 to 15% of cases do two referees agree on acceptance or rejection the first time. Feel like physics. So I leave that as dean because experimentalists in physics and theorists would never agree with each other. They hate each other. Even in the same discipline, theory and experimentalist, they hate each other. So I thought, at the time I thought that was a problem in my university because we are in developing countries, but with the conferences, I just noticed that the problem is everywhere. The problem is Weller, that she did a huge job in her book. And I'm talking about the 202, an old problem. She reviewed 300 journals, etc., and one of her conclusions, peer review's outstanding weaknesses is that of error of judgment, either unintentional or intentional, are sometimes made, asking someone to volunteer a personal time evaluating the work of another, possibly a competitor, by its very nature invites a host of potential problems anywhere from holding a manuscript and not reviewing it to careless review or fraudulent behavior. When I was in, I felt the first impact of that, my beloved professor. And then 6 months after, it was published, even with his notations. And I was in the third grade, the third year of my undergraduate. So since then, I started suffering that problem because I suffered because he's one of my role models. He was one of my role model is this professor. So I thought that it was something with developing countries. My surprise in these 22 years organizing international conferences is not in developing countries. because the American Institute of Health,
The National Institute of Health.
the National Institute of Health in this country, so equivalent to the National Science Foundation, but in health. One lady did a work, sent the article. It was refused by Yale. And the one who refused it published it 6 months later. And that was known as the scandal, the Yale scandal. The scandal was not what she did, what the reviewer did. The scandal was because the dean would do nothing about that. The dean of the guy. So she sued him because the dean was taking no action. So the reviewer had to resign. This was a huge scandal, and it's not something that is alone. Everywhere you see these kind of things. And we still are calling ourselves academics, ethical academics, seeing this kind of thing and not doing anything about it. Is that fair? To see a young man beating an old lady and cross your hand and do nothing? Is that fair? Is that ethical? I really hope that I am completely wrong, so I can live better life in what I got left in this life. But it's something that is completely surprising that no one is doing anything about all that, but everyone is talking about that, but no one is doing anything. How about the consensus about the reviewers? We were talking about that yesterday. I mean, we don't have objective statistics, but we have subjective statistics. We are talking about that. This is an objective statistic. Ernst and colleagues found out, sent the same manuscript to 45 experts. That was in the 93. To review it. Each of the experts held editorial board appointment. So it was not any kind of reviewer. Held editorial appointment. And they found the following. 20% rated the manuscript as excellent, and they commended its acceptance. 12% found the statistic of the manuscript unacceptable. The 10% recommended its rejection, and the rest of the experts classified the manuscript as good or fair. What is the consensus? Is there any consensus? Any editor will tell you that. So almost every measure received by the best and the worst evaluation from the reviewers. And people saying this is the best one in the same field. Chubin and Hackett in 90 concluded. Today, peer review is besieged on both practical and symbolic grounds. In their complaints, critics point to the operating characteristic of peer reviewing: low level of consensus. What we saw just some examples. Among reviewer, inconsistency of judgment, errors of omission, which means when a flawed or fraudulent manuscript is accepted. And by commission, when a good paper is not accepted because probably it's going to be stolen. And this is with fairness and with trust is the connection with blockchain. Because blockchain, if something is doing in all its application, is trust and fairness. And this is the meta-cause of what's happening in the reviewing process. This meta-cause is behind all the other causes that hundreds and thousands of articles are talking about that. So all people are making research about the problem, but who's making research about the solution? And this is why Jeremy is insisting about the solution. You see what I mean? Fairness and deception. We can go ahead with more examples about what I'm trying to say. In one study, selected 12 already published research articles by investigators from prestigious and highly productive American psychology department. One article from each of the 12 regarded and widely read in American psychology journals with high impact, with high rejection rate of 80%. So here we are talking about two measures, impact and rejection rate. They mean nothing. They substituted that with the same articles with fictitious name and institutions. Institutions! Suddenly it's not Harvard, suddenly it's a university in Peru. Even they used university in countries that are not known, or developing countries, or developed country, but colleges, not university. That's the change they did. And you know what they found? Altered the manuscript, etc., and they found that only 8% detected the resubmission. The same people. So what the hell they were doing when they reviewed the first time? The 8%, just the 8% was detected as resubmission. The result allowed 9 of the 12 articles to continue through the reviewing process. And then, for those articles that continued in the reviewing process, 9 were rejected. 80% of refusal rate, high impact journals. 16 of the 18 referees, which means the 89%, recommended against the publication, and the editors concurred. The grounds for rejection were in many cases described as serious methodological flaws. This is, what's the year? I don't see the year here. So it's nothing new. You see why I started saying that it's something that everyone knows now. Most of us know that, but we are doing nothing about it.
Well, now, you know, you haven't the Peters and Deci, because once their article was published, they suffered excruciating feedback.
Exactly.
So that might
about not being ethical, because their research is not ethical because it was showing how unethical are the others. So they were really slapped everywhere because they were not ethical, because they didn't tell the editor what they are doing. But this is the objective of the research, not to tell them, because, I mean, so that's the only the people found the involved people is that they were not ethical because they never told us that. This is the essence of the experiment. So this is what he's pointing to.
Well, I mean, then the Journal of Business Ethics had to retract 6 articles due to the massive plagiarism. And another irony, I mean, you know, you ask the question, and this is a conversational session. It's usually very easy to be a conversational session with you.
No, the second one is the conversational one. This one is supposed to be, I don't know what, but it's supposed to be a panel.
Oh, a panel. I see.
A participative panel.
What I would say is one of the things that we really need to look at in terms of why more action has been taken is the nature of the harm that has been done. Because in all these studies, if you look at the art, you know, if you look at them, it's very clear that the process by which articles selected has vastly more randomness than anyone cares to admit. But what they haven't actually figured out is what harm it does, because really the only impact a lot of these articles have is on the careers of the faculty members involved. And because we have so divorced the impact of our articles from actual impact, instead we basically look at a measure of how much we communicate between ourselves, which is an impact factor. Really, the real damage that's done is to the individuals who don't get an article published, so they don't advance in their career as fast as they should have, and the individuals who get an article published that might not be of the same quality, and they advance faster in their careers. But ultimately, that's the damage. It's different in some of the areas where the research actually makes a difference. You know, sometimes in medicine, you actually get fraudulent stuff, and actual decisions for patients are made about that. And they're taking, you know, that's why a lot of this research takes place in areas like medicine, because some of the research they do actually matters. And I think as we look at peer review, we should not separate it from the larger scandal of the fact that so much of our research costs so much money, and yet it doesn't actually have any impact. I would argue that...
Yes, it does have an impact. Hurting people.
Well...
This is why I use the metaphor of, you know, a young guy, you know, beating up an old lady, and all of us academic people just looking at, you know, that, you know, and exploring why he did it. We don't explore how to stop it. So all the research that you can find is this kind of research, discovering again and again and again and again the same problem. But where are the research about the solutions? Where?
They were probably peer reviewed and not accepted.
Well, but you see,
That was a good one.
that the notion of stuff being peer reviewed and not accepted really doesn't fit the model that I have seen in operation, which is that you try for the very top journal you can. When it gets turned down there, you submit to the next level. And eventually, you will find a place that publishes it. Now, in the old days, that would basically put it into complete obscurity. But nowadays, with tools like Google Scholar, you can find those articles. And so, as a consequence, it's not a question of whether or not it gets published, it's how prestigious the publication is. And that's all basically a game. In a sense, I would argue, and of course, this unethical behavior skewing other research, I mean, I think that ought to be grounds for firing, if not jail.
Yes.
But
yes.
that's different from letting research get through because you didn't detect that some of it was plagiarized.
Yes.
To me, that's a different, that's carelessness, and it's very, very hard to assign a cost to the carelessness, and people who participate willingly in the academic system have to recognize that, you know, playing a game where randomness has a huge impact.
Not, I would love to have just randomness. It's not a problem of just randomness. It's a matter of stealing other people's ideas.
But you know, I don't know the statistics on this because nobody does.
As the lady about the Yale scandal.
Yeah, and that's and that stuff is terrible. And it's just like when you see pre-meds, at major universities like Harvard going in and ruining other pre-med experiments because they're trying to get into medical school and they want to prevent their colleagues. And that's unethical behavior, and that should be punished to the full extent. However, my experience with peer review, well, first off, I virtually never see an idea that's good enough to steal in our field. So I think you have to separate out unethical behavior, and that's something that could, that's something where blockchain, a clear chain of custody, could be very effective.
Yes.
From carelessness,
yes,
or being asked to review something,
yes,
where you're not an expert. And the irony here is if we want interdisciplinary research, if we want transdisciplinary research, we're constantly going to have to bring in reviewers who are not experts in the area, because the whole idea is communicating effectively across disciplines, and we can't all have expertise.
So you are stealing my idea at the end. I didn't talk with you about this idea, but you just perceived it, that we are thinking about a journal on international interdisciplinary communication just to do that. And the necessary condition is that someone not from the discipline would understand it.
Right, and that's.
So we are trying to do that after July. We're going to start, but without people like you, we cannot do it. Okay, let's leave that out.
Go ahead.
Oh.
Your point about the lack of impact on publication in the social sciences, couldn't that be a chicken and the egg argument? Because is part of the reason that there isn't any impact is because the research is unreliable?
Well, I think it's I think the research is often conducted in a very systematic and rigorous manner, but the problem is the subject matter is unreliable. So that I think it was in Science magazine a couple of years ago. They tried to replicate 100 of the classic experiments in psychology, and more than half of them couldn't be replicated. And in some cases, the results contradicted the original results. But I've seen that. I mean, I recall a piece of research that I did where we were looking at the effectiveness of an intervention we had, basically an assessment tool for case study learning. And the first time we ran this with one set of classes, we got a beautiful set of statistically significant results from our analysis. And we said, okay, we've finally done it. The idea is we had students analyze a mini case before they took our course, and then the first time we did it, we got this beautiful graph. We published it. And we're so pleased because we finally found a way to assess the learning with case studies. The next time we did it, the results were entirely random. And we replicated the experiment exactly the same way. We used the same cases in the class. The content was, in this case, was delivered in exactly the same way. So how could that happen? Well, welcome to the world of
Yes.
the social sciences.
Yes. Social sciences. I had a personal experience when I was dean in my university. They accepted to have peer review inside the university for the engineers and for the people that are working on local problems that no universal science would accept it. So after 1 year, they accepted to make for local research, solving local problems, to make peer review inside the university. The worst part, so it's not in sociology, it's not just in social sciences. We still in the university, we don't have any idea about what the word peer mean. So if we don't know what's peer mean, how the hell we're gonna know about what is peer reviewing?
But at least in the natural sciences and engineering, if an equation gets solved, it will continue to be solved. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't.
This is the second slide. Do we really know what peer is, or he, or him? I would bet 100 to 1. In my opinion, peer review and peer is not a concept, it's a notion. So it's a set of related definitions. That is in my opinion. It's not a concept, it's a notion.
But the problem is even worse than what you described. Peer review within a context or a particular field, that's one problem. But how would you define peer review whenever you're actually doing ensemble innovative research? Where you're bringing together 10 possibly different technologies together, doing research, coming up with a solution to a real world problem. Who is the peer for that type of research? Who?
My problem is we are doing nothing looking for solution. And when I say we, I'm talking about the 22 people that years of, about the 15,000 of people that have been in this conference in 22 years. This is what I mean by we. We never could start a research project on that, and our proposal in the next session is to start a research project on that. Because everyone is talking about the problem, but who is talking about solutions?
I'd like to add that if you want to submit these kind of interdisciplinary papers, and I have quite some experience with it, they always reject it at the desk because they say this does not fit the goals of our journal. And if you are fitting within an existing domain and do incremental research, that works. If you do completely new things, they never accept it.
But if you have this problem inside experimental physics, you're not going to have it between physics and chemistry. If you are having this, so the problem is a huge one, but no one is, so the only explanation that I have is that no one is interested because his boss is not interested, because his boss do not want to change the way he's making calculus for the promotions. So the job, at least in my university, I told them that, and they got mad at me. They abdicated their job. To whom? To reviewers in the world, to editors in the world. And not even that. To means, transforming means in end in themselves, which is mental, intellectual corruption. Intentional or not intentional is corruption. You cannot confuse the mean with the end, let alone to confuse a measure of one of the mean with the end. Example of measure, impact. I have a lot of examples about. So they confuse not just the mean with the end, but they confuse the mean with one of the many ways to measure them. So the paper I received recently was talking about, hey, in the academic world we are not deciding the measure. The publishers are deciding the measure, and they're competing with themselves to exclude anyone other. And that guy, that is not here, he couldn't come. He's saying something that this problem could be solved by blockchain, because he's a good one. He did a good work in Bitcoins applied to academic funding. Okay, so he's working in Bitcoins for academic funding. When I told him about to apply that to peer review, he said, I was not planning to go to a conference, but right now I'm going. So he was coming until 2 days ago. He told me that he wouldn't come because double, commitment. I wish he was here.
I just want to remind you of one parameter, one factor that just runs the world. It's a money. And what you see nowadays, for example, a friend of mine made a search in the literature of papers that were funded by general agencies, non-profit organizations, and another papers that had in them the acknowledgements to a drug company that gave them the money. I don't think that experiment was needed because I knew it all along, not quantitatively, but I know. And this is one thing. Another thing is that we actually do not have the so-called academic freedom. We have academic freedom to discover whatever we can raise funds for. We are not, it's practically speaking, the money is a big issue, a big parameter in this whole thing. And I wish this is going to change. Right now the situation is that the never-ending stream of new journals are to a point where they apply to people and promise them $20.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
to recommend sending papers to the journal.
Yeah.
How long can you get?
Yeah. An example what he's saying is that. I think everyone knows that. I bet that at least the 50% of you knows that. 120 Frenchmen made a software to detect papers that are generated by artificial intelligence. And he found 120 published IEEE and Elsevier. Let me be sure of what I'm saying. Springer. They couldn't identify 120 papers. So they excluded the publication of all these proceedings to tell them which papers are these. He said, I'm not going to tell you, find it. The papers were published. I'm not going to tell you, find it. They couldn't find that. So they bought his software by tens of millions of dollars, these 120 articles that were generated by computer. Which one of them was? Where? You see, when we started talking, I started looking for this. So who's paying for that? Who's paying for that? Because I love IEEE. I love these people. I mean, I was the president of IEEE in my country. I'm not talking against that. My problem is not IEEE. My problem is the reviewing system. My problem is not Elsevier, it's the reviewing system. Gosh, how long is it going to take us to do something about that? Look at that. the number of papers that are removed after being published. Look at this curve. It's scaring. It's panicking, this curve. And all this is before what has been called predatory publishers. So who are really the real predatory publishers? The small business guy in some developing country that he's trying to do something in his university and made a misstep or whatever, or these people that have, and I know that I'm getting vetoed, so I don't have to lose anything because I don't think that I have too much to live anymore, so I don't care. But this is what I read in that paper that I received 2 months ago. Hundreds of billions of dollars is the revenue. So they need, all of us need to eliminate predators. All of us. But they need also to eliminate people that are not predators, because they're competing with them. Small people. And I'm going to give you an example.
One thing,
Look at that.
Interpreting that chart.
Look at that. Look at that. This is the principal journal. Look at that. Look at that. The red one is the retractions. Look at the difference between these 5 years and these 5 years. Look at the difference. And there were no predator at the time. So who are predating?
But you have to, interpreting that chart, you also have to have the number of articles published, because at an extraordinary rate,
Yes,
it may be
yes,
the percentage
yes.
is not that different.
Okay. If we did these huge business people as editor, and his or her journal is producing losses, what would happen? Fired, who will be fired? So who you have explicit predator, almost stupid predator because they don't know how to do it. And then you have the implicit predator that they need to survive as editor. Because if they don't survive as editor, they would not get the promotion in the university. So what they have got to do, they got to work hard to produce money to the publishers. I'm not talking against the publisher, I'm talking about the academy. Because the publishers are doing their job, and they're doing their job very well. In a legal and legitimate sense of the word. They are doing their job as they have to do, because no business would like to have loss, to lose money, because it's not business intelligence. So I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about us. What are we doing with this problem? Are we doing anything?
I do.
Yeah, I know. This is why I started looking for, as soon as you started talking, I looked for what you are saying. Example of what you were saying.
The way we got around it was created our own newsletter journal and started publishing a group that agreed that we would publish called New Concepts in Global Tectonics, and they'll publish anything that sounds reasonable, even if it doesn't necessarily agree with conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
So that was one way to get around it, but you could do that in Asia. Internet, but back in the medieval period, it would stay under wraps, but now it gets out.
But who are the people who are allowing all that? You, me, you getting the blame. We are doing nothing in academy in order to balance business with academy. Because we are accepting all what we are told to accept. Indexation, that's okay, indexation. Impact factor, that's all right, impact factor. But as I was telling him yesterday, should we publish to impact as it was conceived, or should we impact in order to publish our impact? It is the other way around. It is the other way around, at least in developing countries. I told him yesterday I have a metaphor, a bad metaphor for us. But I can't say it because I'm not American, okay? We are self-imposing, in Latin America at least, and I suppose in developing countries. We are self-imposing cultural colonialism. No one is imposing colonialism on us. We are self-imposing that because we are making bad copies of what is not working in the developing countries.
I can tell you from my experience in South Africa, they have started establishing ridiculously high standards for what counts as research and what does not count as research, and providing almost no resources to faculty. And it really does not make any sense to imitate the system that for those two criteria, I'm very happy with it. That's why I'm happy, with the humanities. The problem is a lot of the research in our area is neither beautiful nor useful, but it can have a very high impact factor. In my field, we've had over 400 articles that investigate the question of whether the intention to use a system precedes the actual use of a system. This is part of the technology acceptance model. Now, in what possible universe would the intention to use a system not precede the actual use of the system? Now, I can find special cases where it might be the opposite direction, but on average, it's got to be that. But fortunately, that's a simple enough thing so that we can statistically demonstrate it, and we demonstrate it over and over and over again because for a long time that type of article got kind of a free pass publishing in our premier journals. Ironically, in my own particular case, I went up for promotion in 2006, and almost all of my work was in the instructional technology area. My department was very strongly behind me, but I went up to the college, and the professors there said, well, you're doing too much work in education, which has a lower, it's lower on the pecking order.
Education lower.
Pecking order than research.
Education lower.
In the next 2 years.
It's higher education, and education is lower.
Yeah.
And he's in higher education.
But
Education is lower.
The interesting part of this story is in the next 2 years, I wrote a series of articles, and 2 of them were accepted in a premier journal in my field, MIS Quarterly, and I breezed through the process. The irony that the subject of those 2 articles was that our research serves no conceivable useful purpose. Now, the promotion and tenure committee could not care less
Yes.
what the article was about.
Yes.
What they cared about was where it was published.
You used to just take the whole CD and analyze how many pages it is.
And in fact, I am very long-winded, and so by one article in 1998, I reached number 15 in the world for 5 years in the MIS field because I wrote 2 very long articles as a sole author in our top journal. And I would argue any metric, we are the ultimate source of the problem. And we would rather be But that's what I mean by the whole randomness. Now, the issue of corruption, I think, has to be separated out. But I think at least in my field, I think the issue of corruption is probably a much, much smaller issue than the issue of.
Yes, you're right on that. I agree with you on that. It's hurt more, but it's less frequent. Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
I would like to add something. Well, very recently, our university decided that we will not be evaluated anymore on an individual tenure track. We will be evaluated on the research group as a total. So if you are a research group with, let's say, some professors, some tenures, and so on, you will be evaluated as a whole. And you will be not only evaluated on your output for research, but also on your teaching. And they will upgrade the teaching, because professors should be excellent in teaching students. And sometimes it has been forgotten for, let's say, some decades about university. And we want to be very critical on that, because I really think teaching gives you another perspective on your research, your performance.
Well, teaching is where we actually have impact. You know, that's where we can actually demonstrate impact. You had your hand up a little.
Okay, I think this very topic is very interesting because it goes beyond what we are saying here. And one of the problems which, as a young researcher, I found out that this issue of publish or you perish is a very contributing factor, whereby, like what you just said, trying to change the narrative of how you evaluate, how you promote lecturers and stuff like that. Because you are being put under pressure for you to publish, not minding whether does it make impact. Yes. Who reads your article? What after 10 years, you find out you're a professor, but no one has read that no one has cited that very article. But you are growing in terms of numbers of articles you have published.
I really understand what you are saying. Talk with other people about the problem. But people, full professor, old people like me that have nothing much to live anymore, at maximum 10 years, so we can promote people like you. Because I am sure that in 10 years, that what I got probably left in this life, I'm not going to do it. But I'm hoping that young people could do something about this problem that old people couldn't solve. But you have a responsibility with your family. So accept the publish and perish.
From what you were saying earlier, it sounds like to me the culprits are the people that fund research that don't have any impact. So how do you stop that?
Well, the people who fund research in business are universities. We get very, very little external funding. You know, the fact that I did about an NSF, a couple of NSF grants to develop case studies was considered remarkable. In fact, I was the first person to actually get an external NSF grant that our college had seen. And business schools, they get their funding from the large number of students we run through, and then we basically take that funding and we apply it to research. If you look at the economics of our school, it was interesting when in 2001, IS majors peaked. We had 1,100 undergraduate majors. That brought in a lot of tuition. By 2003, we were down to 175 majors, a drop of well over 80% in the number of majors, so we had the shortage of tuition. But we had 2 required courses, both of which were taught by instructors, and both of which had enrollments of over 1,000 people each semester. As a result, those 2 instructors educated more than 2/3 of the credit hours that our department produced. It generated enough revenue so that the senior faculty could still teach their 1-2 loads throughout that process, making large amounts of money. Now, in some of the sciences, to get grants. And so in engineering, for example, computer science is extremely protective of NSF because it supplies something like 84% of their external funding. But the problem is not limited to places having external funding. It is basically a pecking order that academics have created for themselves. And, you know, it makes for a pretty nice lifestyle. And, you know, that's part of the problem of, that's part of the challenge that we face.
So the impact is to bring money to the university, but it doesn't really have an impact in the world as far as science?
No, that's, ultimately the research, you know, the way we measure impact is by how many other people cite our articles. Well, that's a circular, you know, with that being our measure, that creates a nice circular cybernetic flow that guarantees that nothing is going to escape that whirlpool. We all cite each other, and therefore we say we're doing a good job, but it actually, you know, researchers check in, but their research never checks out into the real world, and this is particularly business. And I see some of my DBA students laughing because they've heard me talk about this before. One of the solutions our university has done is we have a program where we have working executives who are expected to go out and apply research methods to their job situation. That way, at least we know the research impacts one person. Go ahead.
You said that research is not relevant to the state using ACI. So what? What can you do with it? Well, here's one thing that's kind of earth-shattering. You can use it as a feedback mechanism for adaptive learning. For VR, for AR, for MR, for computer-based instruction. Once they see that and say, oh, yeah, that's a good possibility, and yeah, that's relevant. Can you build it? Yeah, been there, done that. So initially, who's to say what is and is not relevant from a research perspective? Especially if you're going to
And who define relevance? That's the problem. Who define relevance?
Well, and you see, I think part of the problem is we break things up into rigor and relevance, and I would argue that there is a third part of this equation, which I refer to as resonance, which is the ability of the research to escape that cycle into the real world. And if the research doesn't have resonance, if it's written in a way that it can't be understood, if it doesn't get out into the real world, then it just contributes to this cycle. And one of the things that we've done is we've created a peer review system where writing very clearly can actually be a disadvantage, because the reason that the computer-generated jargon gets into the literature is a lot of the peer reviewers don't want to admit they have no idea what the thing says.
It's about language, in fact, it's not.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, well, I think this is a serious problem, and what I can see there is not a new problem. It's an old problem.
There.
The data we find from decades ago, and it seems it didn't change in spite of the technology.
It worsened.
Development, yeah. Because in the 80s, maybe, for example, papers were sent by mail or something like that. Now we are using internet, email, and so on.
It's easier to copy and paste.
Yeah, possibly. Yes, easier now with the new technology.
And I'm not kidding. I have proofs.
Yeah, but there are proofs for
What kind of solution are we finding now to have a real efficient way of
But how you take plagiarism when the reviewer is doing that?
Well, everyone has their own opinion. My opinion is based upon complexity, is that a journal paper is a terrible way to communicate information in a complex environment. So what we need to do is we need to evaluate products of research beyond journal papers. When I designed the DBA program, one of the things I did was I added 3
I need to go back to a very important point that we didn't talk about it. This lady, after, reviewing 300 publication articles and books and et cetera, in the 2002, ended up defining, if it can be defined, a peer-reviewed journal. Look at that. Look at this definition. A peer-reviewed journal is one that has a portion of submitted manuscript evaluated by someone other than the editor and journal. So my big question is, who decides the size of the portion? And I'm going to tell you about some painful experience of us, not me, not just me. We defined in the web page until 2005 that we will have between 10 and 12% of the papers as invited paper, not reviewed paper. So we defined that because I read that. So no one defined that in the journal, but I tried to be honest and define it in front, you see, right away to define it. So we received a paper in the 2005 from 3 persons from MIT, PhD candidate from MIT, on a subject that I don't understand, but even if I wouldn't understand it, at the time we had about 1,500 papers submitted. I cannot do it all myself, so I have we have to rely on reviewers. So the reviewers there was no consensus in the reviewers. I saw the 3 guys in the web, 3 PhD students from MIT, and said, I'm going to invite them. And told them in capital letters that this is an acceptance with no peer review. You know, the professor told NBC, no, England, BBC, and Reuters distributed the news that 3 guys in MIT fooled a conference, sending them a gibberish, because they used for the first time this program that generate papers. Okay? No one said that it was accepted as non-reviewed, that is in capital letters. I'm talking about Reuters, who distributed the news. And someone told me the other day that I'm still bleeding. I said, yes, I'm still bleeding. So what? When people started asking, I started giving the explanation. No BBC, not Reuters, not CNN, not MSNBC, not the global, Massachusetts, the capital of Massachusetts.
Boston Herald.
The Boston Herald. The Boston Globe. No, the Boston Globe. That's are the people that at least I remember now. No one, after talking with me, apologized for the giving a wrong news. I send them the acceptance. I say is non-reviewed. Non-reviewed. because of this definition that editor can accept. It was not hidden. It was upfront between 10 and 20%, 10 and 12% of invited paper. 3 guys from MIT. There was no consensus in the reviewers. So they were invited as make a presentation as non-peer reviewed. So they said anything but non-peer reviewed. You see what I mean? So just a moment, we were hit strongly. He knows that. Yeah. He invited me to a National Science Foundation founded workshop to present our case, because that deserved a case study that he offered to help us with case study to see what's happened as case study with double review, anonymous and non-anonymous. He said, I tried to sell this methodology to the AAS. He was a former president. Everyone loves the methodology. No one did anything. So this is why he wants to bring up again the problem to this conference. You don't have anything to lose anymore. So one paper that was accepted as non-reviewed, but look at that. I'm going back to the same. $120 papers. You see what I mean? I prefer not to interpret myself. You just interpret. Okay? So my question is IEEE predators? No, they are not. The problem is not in IEEE. Example, another one. With not Elsevier, this one is with Elsevier, this one is with Elsevier. So we are talking about the 3 largest publishers in the world. It was just a new in Nature, no one read it. But in our case, it was BBC, it was Reuters, it was CNN. You see, when the power moves against people, when the power moves, but these people, they have the power. So who's going to move against them?
Chief, I just want to point out, in fairness, that when I was editor-in-chief of Informing Science for 7 years, I desk rejected probably more than half the submissions because we have a scarce set of reviewers, and we don't want to submit to them something that is obviously not going to get published, including things like which somehow made their way into the system. And this is something, and so as a consequence, a portion of the papers submitted to Informing Science were in fact not peer reviewed, but they were rejected. And what that statement didn't say was whether the papers are accepted or rejected.
It was the truth, but part of the truth, because the other part was hidden. Yeah. But this is not the case with IEEE. 120 were accepted as reviewed and published. And no one knows that. And then here's the concept of meta-predator. Everyone knows what predators are. But who is the meta-predator? Bills is a meta-predator because he got in his list 6,000 people that he decided that they are predators. He decided that. Until one of them sued him because got the money that others didn't have. Sued him, and then he disappeared. The list of him disappeared, and he disappeared from the face of the earth. No one knows now where is he now. But what's happening? His page disappeared, everything disappeared, but people, bloggers, they're still showing there what he called predators. And then Jeremy Horn, and I'm not sure you said, he sent me a proof that this guy, he was a librarian, that this guy was charging $5,000 to remove you from his list. So who is the predator? Or he's predating, calling people predators. So this is the concept of meta-predators.
By the way, we're out of time. And
So is that ethical? Because I have people here that they are confused. How many of people of you are invited session speakers? Invited session are invited papers. Are invited papers. And say to the BBC that I accepted him a paper that is generated at random from a computer machine. He can say that.
And they would be very suspicious. Fine, and not suspicious.
So let me to end this session to make this distribution. It's not edited. I did that between 10 and 5 in the morning, renewing, trying to renew what we did in the 206 about seeking people, finding people, identifying people who would like to make research for the solution, not in the problem, but in the solution, especially using the blockchain. So if it's not your field, in your university, please, you very probably would have someone who know how to program, in any of the platform of blockchain. And you will be making great service to the next generation, really. So we are starting again what we did in the 206. There is the 206, and it was a failure. So now we are hoping that it's not failure could work, because there is a new technology that can make it work, that is based on trust.